Okay, guys, we're back, and now we have the Justin Baldoni deposition. Let's get into it. An understanding of why they've been promised ghost equity or some sort of promise of equity in Wayfarer? I believe so. Can you tell me? I will start with Ahmed. Ahmed was my former partner at Wayfarer Entertainment, which was a small production company that I had started years ago, and he's an independent producer now. But I didn't feel like I could have started Wayfarer without his help with Wayfarer Entertainment, so I gave him a small piece of my own equity. Jamie Heath took a low salary compared probably to a lot of other folks and has lived and breathed the company. And Steve and I felt he deserved a small piece of equity. And I'm still unsure if Tara Hanks officially has any or that any was promised. But when she joined, I think it was discussed. But I don't have a full memory of it. Would you say it's accurate that you and Steve Sarowitz co founded Wayfarer Studios? Yeah, I think so. When did that happen? I believe officially it was around the time of the pandemic, so early 2020. But I know it was starting to happen, like there were conversations in 2019. I just don't know the exact date the papers were signed or anything like that. And how did that come about? The starting of Wayfarer Studios? Uh huh. I had always wanted to have the means to create movies that I thought could make a difference and help people. And Steve had a very similar worldview, and he wanted to make movies that could help people too. So we started Wayfarer. How did you come to know Steve Sarowitz? I first met Steve when he was making a film called The Gate. It was a story of the Bab, who was a central figure in the Baha'i faith, and we were introduced because he said he didn't know what he was doing and he needed some guidance. And so I helped him out, and we became friends, and we have a shared faith. Do you know approximately when this was that you were introduced to him? I don't. I feel like maybe 2016 or 2017. Would you say there's a common thesis or and then I don't know. And I don't know if I we would quantify that. I don't believe so. Are you the co-chairman of Wayfarer Studios? I am. Do you hold any other titles with respect to Wayfarer Studios? I do not. And what are your responsibilities as co-chairman of Wayfarer Studios? Mostly thinking of the future direction of where I would like to see the company going. I assist with creative. That's pretty much it. Do you have any responsibilities with respect to the financials of Wayfarer Studios? No. Do you have any responsibilities with respect to the day-to-day operation of Wayfarer Studios? No. Would you say that Sarowitz is the money guy and you're the creative force behind Wayfarer Studios? Sarowitz is quite creative, but I think, and then we jump to page 51. I can't think of anything right now. In any other role than an attendee, I started speaking in my 30s, and I don't know if I ever spoke at one or not. Do you know a gentleman by the name of Labid Ariz or Aziz? Yes. Who is he? Labid? Yes. Was the original COO of Wayfarer Studios. And when did he cease operating in that role? I think about a year into his role. Was he a good COO? I'm not sure I'm qualified to judge what a good COO is. Did you ever have any concerns personally with him or in his role as COO? I did. What were those concerns? I felt he would often promise things in deal making that weren't possible. He was a bit of a wheeler and dealer, and there were certain instances where I did not feel he was telling the truth. Can you identify any of those incidents for me? I just remember getting phone calls saying, like, Labid said this or Labid promised this, and being very confused because that wasn't something that he could be promising. It was important to me that we were always honest and that we didn't enter into deals with people and make promises that we couldn't keep. And I didn't always feel he operated with that integrity. Can you give me any specific examples? The one I can think of right now is my dad is also in the entertainment business. He was one of the founding fathers of what is called product placement. And I always wanted to work with my dad, and it's a sweet relationship. But I remember my dad told me that he had promised Labid, or Labid had promised him that he could build out an entire product placement division of Wayfarer Studios and that he would put him on salary. And I think he got my dad's hopes up, which my dad, is 70, and that wasn't even part. I guess we skip. You explain the truth of what happened. If my memory is correct, I was being accused of many things, but one of them was like putting Miss Lively on a phone call with a dietitian, which was a lie and an extreme distortion of the truth. Oh, now we're getting into some juicy things. Who is Dan Saladino? He's a personal trainer. Is he Miss Lively's personal trainer? I would assume so. That snitch. And what about your text messages with him? Did you believe at the time would help you demonstrate the truth of what happened? The communication between him and myself that showed that he was also working with me. How many screenshots do you recall sending to Mitz? I wish I could tell you. I don't know. More than 2? Yeah. More than 5? Probably. More than 10? That was a very hard time. I will say, and then we skip down. And is this your idea? Is this the idea from your partner, Steve Sarowitz, about flipping the narrative that you were just discussing flipping the narrative about? Can I have a second to read it, please? Of course. Okay. So so is this the substance of the idea that you were just talking about that came from your partner, Steve Sarowitz, about flipping the script? Yes. And that included flipping the script from Ryan saying, as read, script was a disaster and he saved the movie, to something about Ryan claiming the female hired was a feminist writer, didn't know how to tackle a female fan, etc., of female film. Did you see that? Yeah. This idea that was this that this was a female writer and a female film, and that what Ryan Reynolds was saying was essentially misogynistic. Did that come from Steve Sarowitz? Objection. I think I said here that my partner Steve has asked about this, so I was passing that along. So this idea, something about Ryan claiming the female hired was the feminist writer, didn't know how to tackle a female film, etc., came from Steve. That was what was passed on to me. Did you use any judgment about whether or not that was a good idea before you passed it along? I think it was implied in him saying the script was a disaster. So I just passed it along. I didn't agree with him. You didn't agree with Mr. Sirwitz's idea? Is that what you mean? I didn't agree with what Mr. Sirwitz was saying in terms of what Ryan was inferring when he called the script a disaster, meaning that Ryan was essentially acting. I guess we skip on. Think she represented the Rock. Okay, we must be talking about Leslie Sloan. Uh, and she said that on the call that Mr. Reynolds had like terrorized the Rock or something to that extent. Something about something about a letter. I don't remember the details, but something like about like he had written a letter and it was like they wouldn't do press together. I don't know. Um, it was a lot of gossip. But that's why I remember laughing because I was just like, oh, did you feel supported by her on that call? Yeah, as I said earlier, it kind of felt like, oh, I'm sorry. Oh, oh, don't worry. She's this, she's that. I'm sorry, we're talking about not Leslie Sloan, Stephanie Jones. Uh she's this, she's that. It'll be fine. The movie's going to come out and it will be awesome. And everybody had a bad experience with her. It was like that kind of call. Did you feel like she believed what you were relaying to her about your experiences on set? Yes, I don't remember sharing much, but what I did share, I just shared the truth. And she said, "Yeah, yeah." What do you remember sharing with her about your experiences on set? I specifically remember sharing the situation with our trainer and asking him about what he thought Miss Lively might weigh when we shot the scene where I had to pick her up because of my back, and how then they confronted me the next day, and how this trainer evidently then went and told her that I was asking about her weight or something, and then how that became this big thing, and they sat me down, and I just remember her kind of not being able to believe that was even a thing. I believe I shared with her that I had made a comment about the way Jenny Slate looked in her wardrobe. And when I used the word sexy, I think she started responding by joking about how, again, I'm not going to, I don't even want to, if that's okay, repeat the words that she said, but describing, generalizing that women and their fragility. And then I think I talked about the wardrobe and how it was with the wardrobe, and just that it felt like it was just a very hard experience. Like that's kind of what I remember. Do you remember sharing any of her anything sharing any do you remember sharing with her anything else regarding your experiences on set on that call? And then we jump. Can you describe that journey for me briefly here? Do you want me to describe my whole book journey briefly? Is it possible? I'm happy to try. I just don't know what briefly is. I'm just trying to understand what the idea behind that book and the podcast. Well, the book was really a self-exploration of looking at all the unconscious messages that I've taken on as a man, but more importantly as a human in my life. All of the mistakes I've made, the social constructs and kind of invisible scripts I that I maybe have been living by that I wasn't even aware of, and putting them in a form that I was hopeful could help other men. And the podcast, I think, was to answer your question, was a way to have a conversation about some of those same topics that oftentimes were uncomfortable, so that we could have something for men outside of the book. Did the book or the podcast deal with notions of ma- toxic masculinity? Was that part of it? I actually say in the book that I don't like to use that phrase toxic masculinity, so I will answer your question no. But I think that would be more of a perception based on who was listening. What phrase do you prefer than toxic masculinity, or do you not like using that phrase? As I wrote about, I think that the phrase toxic masculinity was inherently divisive. I believed it became political, and a lot of men felt attacked by the use of the word. And I didn't feel that it made any sense to use a term that would immediately make men defensive, especially because those were the very men that I wanted to reach. And I also don't believe that masculinity is inherently toxic. I never have. I was very proud to be a man. I never felt like I needed to apologize for being a man. And I know that was something that was going around with a lot of the phrase toxic masculinity. And that said, there were a lot of people that maybe kind of lumped this idea that because I was doing a podcast and writing a book about masculinity, that I was saying that masculinity was toxic. But generally, those were people that didn't read my book or listen to the podcast. I just wanted to help men and help men embrace all the parts of them that made them human. And that also means the stuff that sucks and that you never want to look at it, and that maybe you've been hiding or you don't even realize you're hiding. It was just about confronting those parts of ourselves and just holding ourselves accountable to try to be better men. What are some I'm sorry, that wasn't very brief. That's all right. And you'll forgive me if I'm using the wrong terminology around this stuff, but feel free to use whatever you think are the appropriate words. But you said a lot. Yeah. And you said the stuff that sucks is that you never want to look at, or maybe you've been hiding, or you don't even realize you've been hiding. Can you give me some examples of what kind of stuff you're talking about? Sure. I mean, a lot of men deal with shame. A lot of men. I mean, suicide among men is increasing yearly, and many more men take their own lives than women. And then there's belief that And I don't say this as an expert. This is just from my own research and experience. There's a belief in this specific world that this happens because men don't have a support system, because men have been taught not to share their pain and their trauma because it's oftentimes used against them and weaponized against them by both men and women. So, an example could be a man that was abused as a child who never spoke to anybody about it. In this case, I will give you an example of a man that was maybe abused by an older man, but this man identifies as being heterosexual. But because he was abused by an older man, struggles with with the abuse itself and being taken advantage of. But also the fact that he was also abused by a man, he's also questioning his sexuality or his gender. And also, there's a preconceived notion that as a man, you don't want to go to therapy because it makes you less of a man. So perhaps this man didn't get the help that he needed, and he was, as we say, suffering in silence, and he didn't know who to reach out to. And instead, that man took out all of his feelings and shame and unworthiness and confusion about what happened to him and blamed himself and would take that out on other people, maybe other men, maybe other women. Maybe this man himself became an abuser. The whole idea is that this is something that, as a man, you would find embarrassing and shameful because it's not something that is socially accepted or acceptable to talk about. So the hope was to normalize getting the help you need to normalize vulnerability. Let men know that they're not alone, that there's all kinds of examples of these types of things. I'm happy to name another one if you want me to. And again, this is just hypothetical, man. And many of these men end up eventually taking their own lives, and that breaks my heart, and hurting women in the process, which also breaks my heart. Did any of your work on the podcast or in this book around this idea man enough have to do with gender norm or gender relations as between men and women? I mean, I think the entire book was inherently about gender and masculinity specifically. But as I said in the book, I'm not an expert, and the book it was as much more my personal journey in trying to use as many anecdotes and stories I could find in my life to point men to a direction of maybe them being able to look at themselves. I'm sure some of it was discussed either on the podcast or in the book as just it's like it's just a large conversation. And my book was meant to be just a tiny little piece of a personal journey mostly meant for men. But as we know, many women read it and it gave them and then gave it to their men. Have you seen have you seen reporting around you that identifies you as an ally of women or a feminist ally? I would say so, yes. Do you believe yourself to be an ally of women or a feminist ally? I certainly have attempted to be. Oh God, you're aware of the Me Too movement, I'm assuming. I am. Are you aware of any idea that came about of the Me Too movement that one should believe women, both believe women and speak when they speak out about misconduct against them? Yes, I'm aware. Do you agree with this idea? And that's over for now. Now, next up, there is Steve Sarawitz's deposition, and that is a lot of pages. And I'll probably have to break that down into two parts because it's a lot. But please like, share, subscribe. That will really help me out a lot. This is a lot of information, so as it comes, I'm trying to break it down for everybody. Um, People that know about this case, you know, these depositions, and we're trying to piece everything together with things that we've already known, so that way we're getting, everything's starting to finally come together. So please like, subscribe, and I'll be working on the next one.